We are now more or less halfway through the year. You can kind of tell from my shaggy beard, my overgrown hair, and my reminder to renew my driver's license recently. But aside from that, I figured that this was kind of a good way to perform a halfway check-in on what I consider to be some of the best and or more noteworthy McFarlane Toys figures that have been released in 2023 thus far. And it's been quite a year with a couple of things that we've never really seen before from McFarlane Toys, some of which were very unique figures that were very surprising, and then others that were a little bit shocking and not necessarily the most fondest of lights, especially when you take into consideration an entire wave, the way that things are released, the things that things are being put up for pre-order that are kind of debatable or controversial amongst the community, but that's neither here or there. What I'm really going to focus on is really what exactly stood out to me as far as the content that was covered on the channel is concerned. That's probably going to be a good segue into my quote-unquote conditions. This is my list. Of course, it's going to be very subjective, and it's going to be differing from other people of the different McFarlanes that have been released in the year as far as their figure of the year or some of the more considerable honorable mentions. And also, one little caveat is going to be that it has to have been covered on the channel. So if it's a McFarlane that has been released and didn't manage to make it into the cut and you noticed it, probably means that it wasn't really reviewed or covered in a short kind of manner like the YouTube shorts, or I frankly just didn't really care to pick it up and didn't really get included into my collection. And that's rule number one. There's only one other rule. Rule number two is that this is kind of a informal check-in on some of the better McFarlane figures that have been released so far. Not exactly as exact and definitive as whatever that top 5 is going to be by the year's end. So because of that, I figured, all right, let's not do anything in any specific order. So none of these figures really outrank the others, even if I may start with one and then kind of segue to another. So there's no particular order of where to rank these figures so far. There's going to be an ironclad structured ranking video at the end of the year, but for now, let's just look at these figures in a much more loose format. With that housekeeping out of the way, we can now get started on our list. I got my box over here of some of the figures that I had in storage, but more or less the figures that have been released in 2023, covered on the channel, and I figured, yes, these need to be kind of showcased in the video and put on the spotlight because, frankly, these are the ones that stood out to me. And we're gonna possibly start with a controversial one that's probably going to rifle a few McFarlane collectors' feathers, and that's going to be what many consider to be the figure of the year thus far, at least one of the contenders, and that's the Hush Batman, the blue and gray variant. Emphasis on the word variant because that's exactly why it is that this is probably going to be ranking a little low. Should there be an exact order? Again, right now, nothing is set in stone, but this is probably going to be the first quote-unquote darling that could potentially get killed by year's end should there be better stuff released in the year as I get to those reviews. But the reason for why I put this guy in that potential chopping block is going to be that even though I like the inclusion of the extra hands, the batarangs, but also that seminal feeling about the figure that this is a lot of people's definitive Batman, at least for the time being, with the blue and the gray because of how comic accurate it is, because of how faithful it is to that particular story arc, but also the way that it's competently structured and the body sculpt, the etching on the bat symbol there in the middle. But what a lot of people liked about this figure overall is going to be that head sculpt. It's got the neutral face, it's got the blue, it's got the muted colors. Everything works very favorably towards the figure, but we've seen this figure already. It's like saying that some games are considered game of the year, but they're remakes, especially this year where we had a lot of remakes be released. So it's kind of put into that gray area where is it considered game of the year? Or in this case, figure of the year, considering that we've seen this guy literally twice before. In fact, one other variant is going to be mentioned a little later here in this video, but the other is part of that Hush 2-pack that was released with the Hush variant with the open mouth, and then the black and gray one with the diorama and all that stuff that went to clearance almost immediately over at Target. This one, there's something about it that, again, it's because of that repetitiveness that I figured that it maybe if this guy was a brand new buck, brand new mold, he probably would have been a little higher, but nevertheless, he's still a highlight that I still think that people should definitely pay attention to should they find it at some point in the store, regardless of retailer. So the next controversy I may present is the next one on my list that might actually rank above hire him, but again, nothing is set in stone. I must reiterate, Earth Negative 2 Batman, which I must kind of put out a retraction. I haven't printed a retraction in 20 years. But it's going to be the Earth -2 Batman from the Arkham Knight, that specific costume, because yes, a little bit of a bias here, the red and black color scheme, specifically black with the red accents. It's my favorite clash, my favorite kind of theme whenever I customize something in a video game, or whenever I want to like design something, whenever I get to eventually building my own PC. That's exactly what I want the PC to look like. Overall black, but with a little bit of the RGB lined up in red. And because it's able to take an awful lot of the things that worked in the Arkham Knight suit, while at the same time building a brand new mold, well, at the same time also Frankenstein and a couple of pieces that look a little familiar, there's at least enough going on right here that, to me, this was already going to be a favorite, even from when I saw the production stills to now having him in hand. The cape is a little questionable, especially when pulling him out of the damn box because of that slit that I've already covered in the McFarlane Toys versus Marvel Legends essay. Something that I still, to this day, think that McFarlane Toys needs to fix, because I do personally think that that's something that could go a long way as far as a lot of collectors. And it sounds like I'm not the only one. And Earth -2 definitely puts that forward because of how much of a nuisance he is to take him out of the box. All that aside, though, the actual build, the structuring of the articulation, it's actually a really solid figure. The hands could have also been a little bit swapped, but again, this guy stands out a little bit higher than the Hush Batman. However, to meet a little bit in the midway point, I will say that much like Hush Batman, he is also on the potential chopping block. I keep wanting to say chopping block. He could be canceled out immediately should better stuff be released later in the year. Number 3. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, you knew that with that cloth cape, this was going to be a standout for 2023. Again, so far, it is the Keaton Batman. No, the cloth cape does not perform any kind of excuse towards that bat flick. I mean, it was just a rock and a hard place that not only McFarlane Toys, but even Hot Toys and other toy manufacturers found themselves with that likeness issue. But at least they were able to put a bit of extra work on the Keaton Batman. You can still question the likeness because of the puffiness of the cheeks, and so an awful the cheeks on his face, at least. That's what I'm referring to. But at least you cannot go against that cloth cape. That, yeah, there's some people out there that say that the fabric could have been a little bit better, but just the fact that it's cloth alone, considering the rubberized capes that sometimes get scratched up by the plastic that come out of the box, as well as being very difficult to pose. I mean, they're almost non-posable. They're structured in a specific way that you can't really move, whereas here, you can drape it over the shoulders, you can pull it back, you can throw once, have that kind of iconic Keaton look with one side draped and then the other one not, kind of like he does in some of those promotional stills. But overall, it's the actual representation of the modern suit that works really well to kind of give us a best of both worlds case of the Flash Keaton suit with the modernizations of the belt as well as the middle part of the suit, while at the same time having that iconic bat symbol there in the chest, the structure of the cowl. Overall, there's just so much working here, and the actual quality of the plastic makes articulation a breeze, and one of the more favorable figures as far as accessories. The extra hands, the back grapple, an extra little bit of paint would have gone a long way, but overall, there's a reason for why this guy is still, till now, very difficult to find. I saw somebody on Reddit say that they work at Target or Walmart, one of those retailers, and they just barely got another case of Flash figures. And in that case, just one Keaton Batman. And it was gone. Gone by the end of that day. So there's a testament as to why it is that this along with that 89 gold label 2-pack, disappeared in a flash. So now I'm going to do something a little weird, a little kooky, and I'm going to break away from the official listing that is part of the highlights and the best of McFarlane, and now actually devote this segment to honorable mentions. Some figures that I in no way, shape, or form see end up being in my top 5, even with the halfway part of the year now come and gone. But at least these figures, to me, I feel like need an extra bit of extra little bit of spotlight, an extra little bit of love, because I feel like so many people just kind of looked at these figures and said, whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, there's some things to really look at here. One of which is the Eradicator figure, the gold label Walmart exclusive. Again, typically not a Superman fan, not a huge Superman collector, but taking the clearance price aside, because I did manage to nab this guy for $9, I was still genuinely surprised by the structuring of the suit, the embossment that you can kind of feel on the Superman symbol there on his chest. Could have had some better quality with the cape, and the paint decals around the thigh area feel a little kind of sloshed. The Cheeto fingers, as some people have mentioned online, with the alternate hands. But the fact that he has alternate hands at all, with the open kind of clutch, very dynamic hands, and the fists, as well as the overall look of the sculpting of his head. Granted, you can make the argument that he might have been Frankenstein a little bit from the Dark Knight Returns Superman because of the way that his jaw is kind of looking very familiar. There's at least some form of personality behind this Eradicator that I thought to myself, you know what? I don't regret getting him at all. Granted, it's a little easier said than done considering that he's $9 versus the original $20 retail, but still, I think that if you can find him at clearance, maybe not at full price, definitely not scalping price, but if you go to your local Walmart and you manage to come across him for $9 clearance, don't hesitate. Another one I'll give some respect as far as a clearance price should you come across them, even though that's probably going to be a little difficult since I'm starting to get the notion they made limited quantities out of this guy. And originally he was warming the pegs, but then just as quickly, he kind of disappeared. Haven't seen him since. And that's the Jokerized Dark Detective. Yes, it's becoming a bit of a meme to have Todd McFarlane just take existing figures, Jokerize them, and then call them gold labels or call them exclusives or something like that. I will pass over some criticism saying that please do not milk the shit out of that gimmick, because that's going to be a detracting element versus McFarlane as a brand. But at least one that did charm me enough to pick up was the Jokerized Dark Detective. Not so much because of the Jokerized suit, even though the color scheming of the black on purple with the green spray painted chest symbol, the Jokerized smile on his head, and everything else does kind of favor the color scheming of the figure, even though it came at the cost of having the figure just have this obnoxious, nauseating paint smell. But the added value of that Jokerized symbol on the base, instead of just a generic-ass black DC labeled base, along with the stand for the trading card that you can actually prop up, and it has this cool dynamic color scheming, as well as those playable cards, those 4 included playable cards. There's just so much value here that this is honestly one of the more respected gold labels that, to me, I thought, this is what a gold label should be. So to have not only all that packed in value, but also the cool Jokerized box that, again, gives it that kind of collectability, that kind of personality that makes me kind of proud that this guy can at least stay in box and have him be propped up on like a McFarlane wall. It'll definitely be some form of an eye catcher. And while we're keeping the theme of gold labels going, I have to give a little bit of a brief shout out to the gold label vampire variants, whether it be Vampire Batman that I do have here, or the Vampire Joker that I unfortunately left in storage. But either one of those, I feel, had some pretty commendable traits. Again, don't really like that. Pretty much not just this guy, but also the other one are kind of like repaints. We've seen those body sculpts before for both Batman and Joker respectively, especially this Batman, since this is the one that I just criticized Hush Batman for being a repaint for. Nevertheless, they were at least able to hit a home run with the vampirized head sculpts there, with the blood, the fangs, the overall horror-infused look of not only that, but also the clawed-up hands. When it comes to little details like that, and they're able to really knock it out of the park, I would say that at least deserves some kind of mention on a list like this. And one last honorable mention has to go, I guess you can call it the best of the worst, because even some of the people out there that genuinely despise this wave have to at least give a iota of respect to the actually well-made construction, despite the unfaithful likeness of the Joker from the Dark Knight trilogy wave. Yes, I'm right there with you that this was probably, till this halfway point, the biggest fumble from McFarlane Toys thus far, considering that it really did feel like the wave was kind of pooped out. There were so many problems with each of the individual figures, whether it be lack of accessories, lack of faithfulness, lack of proportions, terrible capes with Batman. But the one that I think came out the least unscathed would have to be this Joker, because he's actually a pretty well-made, solid figure, despite, again, not having the most faithful look to that of Heath Ledger's Joker from the movie. You can make the argument that some Mayfixes out there that are a little bit on smaller scale, or even some NECA figures, like the quarter-inch scale type of figures that have been put out from all the way back in 2008, probably have a much more faithful representation of that Joker. But at least here, you still get that traditional McFarlane quality, even though there's still some questionable areas like the bulkiness of his coat to make him look like he's swole Joker, along with the base here of the money that I would have swapped out for maybe... Obviously, we can't do firearms, but at least like a knife or a Joker card that you could put in his hand, something like that, instead of the base, because even though you do get your options of bases, whether it be the generic circular one or the money, still, there's something else in there that I could have thrown aside from the Build-A-Bane pieces right here. Nevertheless, though, I would say, again, considering this guy to be the best of the worst, but definitely a contender to get eliminated once we get to our official ranking by year's end. So that leaves us with the last two figures I want to cover in this video. And the reason for why I saved these last two figures for last is because, frankly, I'm at a crossroads where I feel like either of these two guys can be swapped for the #1 spot should I, theoretically, perform a impromptu ranking as of right now. Both of these guys are tied for #1. I know that one of them is eventually going to have to give once we get to the end of the year, but for now, I would say that if you are collecting McFarlane toys, nevertheless, McFarlane Toys Batman figures, these two are the ones to get. And poetically, they both happen to be Batman from completely different, out-of-place timelines. You have Gladiator Batman from Dark Knight's Metal, and you have what I call Caveman Batman from the Fighting the Frozen Page Punchers wave. These two are so far my favorite Batman McFarlane figures from 2023 so far. The build quality, the attention to detail on the armor for this guy, as well as that cape that, again, kind of tells the story like he killed a dragon. He killed a dragon. He was able to attach that as a cape, along with the personality behind the bat shields on his shoulders, the gauntlets, the bits on his waist with that belt, the detail behind the belt that you can kind of see etched in there with the armor, as well as the sculpting on the helmet. Though the chin is a little questionable, but overall, the actual build of this guy and the articulation, how surprisingly flexible he is to put in poses, very dynamic, very battle-ready poses. But the same could also be said about this guy, because even though he's lacking quite a bit of armor, quite literally, because he's supposed to be a caveman Batman, you still have so many great little details, from the Rocky bat symbol there on his chest, the stitched together cowl that's probably made from a real primeval bat creature that he probably killed, as well as, like I said, the fur details that wrapped around his boots, the gauntlets, all this stuff. Like, this guy just surprised the living shit out of me. Somebody online said that this actually feels like what Batman would be if he was a He-Man character, or He-Man figure, a Motu figure. And frankly, cannot disagree. If this was a deluxe, really quality, premium He-Man figure, but as Batman, this is pretty much what he's gonna come out to. I just kind of hope that in the future we kind of do away from these packages. I still don't like these packages, even though there's at least a good way of ease of access to the figure by peeling up this slab right here, this little piece of plastic, but still trying to get it cut was still a chore and just an overall pain. But at least this was a small price to pay to get to what is so far one of my two favorite Batman figures of the year so far, in the year of our Lord, 2023. And so far, that is my overall list. So now I have to really throw it over to you guys. What's your favorite McFarlane Toys figure of 2023 so far? Now, I'm going to open up the discussion, the floodgates, if you will. Doesn't necessarily have to be Batman. Doesn't even have to be DC Multiverse. It can be, but if one of your favorite figures comes from the Spawn property, Warhammer, Disney Mirrorverse? Hell, put it in the comment section. Let me know what your guys' favorite figures from McFarlane Toys are so far here in the mid-year check-in for 2023. What's your overall ranking of favorite Batmans? And what are you looking forward to in the back half of 2023? Because we already got a good chunk of stuff lined up, from official confirmed figures like, of course, Nightfall Batman, Batwing, that Two-Faced Batman that I probably will not be getting, spoiler alert, only because guess what he is? Guess what he is? Number 4. God damn it, he's number 4 of this book, and I legitimately have not even pre-ordered that, but I did pre-order Nightfall as well as Batwing. We got a couple of other stuff coming down the pipeline from McFarlane Toys, some of which, like I said, made the waves recently in not the fondest of lights, like the 89 2-pack Amazon exclusive, so we do got that coming forward, as well as some other mega figures like that Batbuster or whatever it's called, pretty much like an armorized Batman that actually legitimately looks pretty dope, and I did put a pre-order down on that, as well as some other stuff that has not been confirmed. I understand that there's some leaks out there, some of which we've kind of already speculated was coming, and then some others that we're looking at like, is McFarlane really capable of putting this out by year's end, let alone not have it suffer the same fate as the Dark Knight trilogy wave? Please, Todd, take your time. Release these things right. And I appreciate you for making it to the very end of the video here. If you did enjoy it, hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. Let me know in the comments once again, what's your favorite McFarlane? What are you guys looking forward to in the rest of the year? What do you guys think about these pre-order practices they've been doing recently? That's a little on the questionable side with their exclusives and the time they go up and their postings on social media, what have you. Let me know. And look forward to more McFarlane Toys centered content here on the channel, because it is definitely going to be happening. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you guys later.